Ever since I was a little girl, my ears started to ring right before something bad happened, and the day I met my coworker, the ringing did not stop for a week. The first time was when I was 7. I was sitting at the dining table with a bowl of cereal going soft in front of me when a high, thin sound started up behind my eyes, and I told my mother my ears hurt, and she told me to finish eating. An hour later, my little brother came off the top bar of the swing set and broke his arm in 2 places, and the sound stopped the second he hit the dirt. After that, I paid attention. It rang the morning our dog ran into the road. It rang the week my father lost his job. It rang the night before my grandmother's heart quit. It never told me what or where, only that something was close, and it never lasted more than a few minutes. So I grew up as the girl who flinched at nothing, who suddenly did not want to get in the car, who begged people to stay home on days that looked perfectly ordinary. My family decided I was nervous, and I learned to stop explaining myself, because explaining only made it worse. By the time I was grown, I had built a quiet system around it. When my ears rang, I checked the stove twice. I did not step off curbs. I called the people I loved just to hear them pick up. Most of the time, nothing enormous happened, because most bad things are small. I told nobody. Who believes that a sound in your head knows what is coming? Then I took a job at a design studio downtown, and on my first morning, I shook hands with a man named Owen, and the ringing started, and it did not stop. That had never happened. Not once in 20-some years. It had always come and gone like weather. Now it was there every time he crossed the floor, soft at the far end of the room, sharp enough to blur my vision when he stopped at my desk. I told myself it was stress, but I sat 10 feet from a man my whole body was screaming about, and I could not work out why, so I watched him. Owen brought donuts on Fridays. He was the first person in the building to learn my name and the only one who used it. None of that quieted the sound. If anything, the kinder he was, the louder it got, and for 2 weeks I let myself believe the ringing had found something rotten under a nice face. Then the accident started. A shelf pulled out of the wall above his desk and came down a foot from his head. He caught his shoe on a power cord by the copier and went into the corner of a table hard enough to crack a bone in his wrist. His car got clipped in the lot while he was inside working. Every single time, my ears were already ringing before it happened. And every single time I said nothing, because what do you say? Excuse me, my head makes a noise around you. Then one afternoon, I finally understood it the right way round. The sound was not warning me about Owen. It was warning me about what kept happening to Owen. Every accident had been his. It had latched on to him because something was coming for him, and it wanted me standing close enough to do something about it. So I stopped keeping my distance and started staying near him on purpose, which is a strange thing, walking toward the one thing every nerve in your body says to run from. 3 weeks in, the whole team went out for lunch. We were on the sidewalk waiting for a table, and Owen stepped to the edge of the curb to take a call, and the ringing went from a whine to something like a scream, so loud the street tilted. I did not think. I got a fistful of the back of his jacket and hauled him backward, and we both went down on the pavement, and half a second later a car came up over the curb at the exact spot where he had been standing and hit the front of the restaurant. The driver had passed out at the wheel, glass everywhere, people shouting, and in the middle of it my head went silent, the way it had the second my brother hit the dirt. Owen sat up next to me, looked at the place where he had been standing, and asked how I knew. I had spent my life lying about it, and I was tired, so I told him. He did not laugh. He did not back away. He said he believed me, and I remember thinking that was the end of it. It was not. 4 days later, the ringing came back, and it came back different, sharper, like it was annoyed I had assumed we were finished. So I started staying late. Not every night, just enough. I would sit at my desk after the hallway lights dropped to their evening setting and look at what had been changed in the room. I crouched under the wall above Owen's desk with my phone light and looked at the bracket, and there were scratches all around the screw heads, bright gouges in the metal, the kind you get from working something loose with a flat tool. The building manager told me that shelf had been remounted the day before it fell. Someone put it up, and inside of 24 hours it came down. Then I thought about the cord. That cord had been zip-tied along the baseboard since before I started. Somebody pulled it out into the walkway Owen used every morning. I took photographs of all of it, and the next day at lunch I put my phone in front of Owen and watched his face go from confused to very still. He handed it back and said there was something he had not told me. He had been given the lead on the studio's biggest project the month before. Hamilton had wanted it. Hamilton had shaken his hand in front of everybody and had barely spoken to him since. I knew Hamilton the way you know somebody who is always in the background of a photograph. 6 years at the studio, organized the birthday lunches, Everybody liked him. 2 days later, he came to my desk with 2 cups of coffee and a grin, said we had never properly met, asked about my weekend, leaned on the wall of my cubicle like we had known each other for years. And the second he got inside 5 feet of me, the ringing spiked so hard I had to grip the edge of my desk to keep my shoulders level. I smiled. I took the coffee. I said my weekend had been quiet. He talked for 3 minutes about the printer and the team lunch on Friday, and he was good at it. And if my head had not been on fire, I would have liked him. That was when I learned something new about the sound. It was not only telling me what was coming, it was telling me who was bringing it. I called Owen that night and told him flat out. He said Hamilton was competitive, but he would not hurt anybody. I could hear him wanting that to be true. Owen was the kind of person who looked for the good in someone first, which is what made him easy to like and easy to take apart. He said he needed more than a feeling, and he was right. So I went looking for someone who would help me get it. Lucinda ran project management and had been there almost as long as Hamilton. Quiet, careful, listened more than she talked. I got her into the little storage room at the end of the hall where people take private calls, and I told her everything except the ringing, the bracket, the cord. The nights Hamilton stayed exactly as late as Owen did. She listened all the way through without one interruption, then leaned back against the shelving and said she believed something was wrong, and also that if I walked into the boss's office with scratched metal and a power cord, I would be the one clearing out my desk. She was not being unkind. She was being accurate. Hamilton had 6 years of goodwill. I had 4 months. She put her hand on my arm and told me that if he was doing what I thought he was doing, he would do it again, and that the only thing that mattered was being ready to catch it in a way nobody could argue with. So the next evening I stayed until the building was empty, and I sat down at Owen's workstation and opened the project folder. Not his email, not his personal files, just the drawings. Page after page of clean, tight work, and then on page 3 of the structural set, one measurement sitting a fraction off from the spec. I pulled the file history. Changed at 10:45 2 nights earlier, from Hamilton's login. Page 7, another number moved. Page 12, a material swapped for something that looked nearly identical and would fail the first serious review. 3 small poisoned spots buried in a 50-page package. Owen would present it, the client's engineers would find them, and he would look careless in front of the people who decide who gets what. And Hamilton would be in the second row shaking his head, saying he hated that this happened, but he was happy to step in. I fixed all 3, went through the file twice more, and did not tell Owen, because one night of edits proves nothing. I needed it to happen again. I needed a pattern too big for anyone to talk their way around. The next morning, Hamilton appeared in the opening of my cubicle with his arms crossed and said I had been watching him. He said it the way you say something funny. The ringing came up so fast and so hard that I could feel it in my back teeth. I told him I did not know what he meant. He tilted his head and said sure I did not, and then said that people who see things that are not there tend to make other people nervous, and he waited 1 extra second to be certain I understood it was not advice. Then he walked off. That was the part that frightened me most, because if I repeated those words to anyone in that building, they would sound like a colleague expressing concern. He knew how to say something sharp in a voice soft enough to survive being quoted. I sat in my car in the empty lot that night with my forehead against the steering wheel, and it was the same feeling I had at 7 with my hands clamped over my ears and my cereal going to mush, helpless. Owen half believed me. Lucinda had told me the truth about what fighting this would cost, and the ringing was not coming and going anymore. It just sat behind my eyes all day like pressure before a storm. I got to Lucinda before anyone else was in the building the next morning and told her what I wanted to do. A lightweight screen recorder on Owen's workstation. 9 at night to 5 in the morning. Nothing running during business hours. Capturing the screen and whatever the laptop camera could pick up if the lid came open. She said it was a real risk, that if it got traced back, it would end both of us. And then she said that if I was right, we would need proof, and if I was wrong, we would delete it and never speak about it again. We stayed behind that evening and set it up and tested it once and walked out to the lot side by side. 2 nights later, I checked the footage from my apartment, hands shaking so badly I mistyped my own password twice. 6 hours of dark screen. Then at 11:03, the screen came awake and the glow lit up Hamilton's face, and I watched him sit down in Owen's chair and open the project folder and change 3 numbers, and I watched him close the lid and push the chair back and walk out. 15 minutes. Start to finish. I copied it to a flash drive twice, put one in my bag and one in the drawer beside my bed, and slept better than I had in a month. I walked into the studio the next morning and knew something was wrong before I reached my desk. People talking low near the coffee machine, eyes going to the boss's door and away again. Owen came down the hall gray-faced and pulled me around the corner and told me that Hamilton had reported unauthorized software on his workstation, a security violation, and they thought Owen had installed it. Hamilton had found the recorder while he was sitting there in the dark changing numbers, and he had not deleted it. That was the part that turned my stomach. He did not quietly remove it and pretend he had never seen it. He carried it straight to the boss and made certain it landed on Owen. The thing I put there to protect him had become the thing being used to end him. Owen asked me very quietly if I had done it, and I had promised myself I was finished lying, so I nodded at him. He looked at the ceiling for half a second and said I should have told him, and then he went into that office and the door shut, and I stood in the hallway with my ears screaming. He was in there 40 minutes, and when he came out, he walked past me without looking at me. Later, I stood by his chair and told him the recording had caught Hamilton at his workstation, and he kept his eyes on his screen and said that I had gone behind his back, that I had put something on his machine without asking, and how was that any different? I did not have an answer that would have helped. He asked me to leave him alone, so I did. Around lunchtime, I locked myself in the small bathroom at the end of the hall, and found out from the mirror that I had been crying at my desk without noticing. Lucinda knocked. Word travels fast in a small office. She did not ask if I was all right because the answer was on my face. She asked if I had saved the footage before they wiped the machine, and I pulled the flash drive out of my bag and held it up between two fingers, and she let out a breath she had clearly been holding since she came down the hall. Then she said the thing that reorganized everything. We could not take it to the boss. Hamilton had already set the story, unauthorized software on Owen's workstation, and walking in with footage from that same software would only prove the story he had told. He had poisoned the well on purpose. We needed a different door, something that would land in front of the client and the boss and the team leads all at once. Somewhere Hamilton would have to answer for it in real time, in a room where he could not get to anyone first. That evening I drove to Owen's building and sat in my car for 5 minutes before I made myself get out, because I did not know if he would open the door. He opened it about halfway, and stood in the gap with one hand on the knob and waited. I told him Hamilton had changed his files, and that I had the footage, and that if he presented those drawings without checking them, he would lose everything he had built. He asked why he should believe me, not cruelly. He just needed an answer before he could take another step toward me. I held up the flash drive and told him I had never once lied to him, not even when the truth sounded insane. He stepped back from the door. His apartment was small and very clean, the kind of clean that belongs to somebody who needs one thing to stay in order. He opened his laptop and put out his hand, and I gave him the drive and sat at the other end of the couch and did not say anything at all. The footage ran, dark screen, then 11:03, and Hamilton's face in the glow, leaning in, hands moving. Owen did not blink through it, and when it ended on the empty chair, he did not close the window. He sat looking at the frozen frame and asked how long. So I told him all of it. The bracket, the cord, the first set of edits I fixed and never mentioned, the coffee, the doorway. And somewhere in the middle of it, his hands started to shake, just a small tremor, the way a body reacts before the mind has caught up. He said he thought Hamilton was his friend, and he was not saying it to me. He was saying it to the version of Hamilton he had been carrying around for 2 years. Then he closed the laptop and asked what we were going to do. What we were going to do was let the studio's own records say it. Lucinda had access to the file tracking system, the log that stamps every edit made to every project document with a time and a login. During the review, at a point Owen chose, she would put the edit history up on the conference room screen. No accusation, no speech, just the data sitting there in front of the client and the boss and every team lead in the building, and Hamilton would have to explain it out loud with all of them watching. Owen turned it over a long time, weighing whether this was right or just another version of going behind somebody's back. Then he said, if we were doing it, we did it clean. No tricks, just the record. We called Lucinda on speaker, and she asked 3 sharp questions and said she would have it queued by morning. I went through Owen's files one more time the next day, and they were untouched. That night, I stayed late finishing the presentation layout, and I did not hear Hamilton come up behind me. He said I had fixed the files again. There was no grin on him this time, no warmth, nothing. He leaned down close enough that I could see the vein at his temple, and said that I thought I was helping Owen, but I was making things worse for myself, and that he had been there a great deal longer than I had. The ringing was in my teeth and my jaw and the backs of my eyes. I did not lean away. I told him that if he knew those files so well, he would have no trouble explaining the edit history in the morning. Something in his face came apart for about half a second, and what was underneath it was not anger. It was fear. Then it sealed over, and he straightened his cuff like we had been discussing the weather, and left. I was in the conference room 40 minutes early. Owen came in looking steadier than he had in weeks and gave me a small nod, just a dip of the chin. Lucinda sat up at the little table in the back with her laptop open, taking notes, which is what she told anyone who asked. People filed in at 9, the boss with his coffee, 2 team leads, a laptop propped at the end of the table for the client representatives on the call. Hamilton came in last and sat in the second row with his arms folded and his legs out in front of him, relaxed as a man who already knows the ending. Then my phone buzzed. Drop it, or I tell everyone you are the one who has been sabotaging Owen's work. Who do you think they will believe? The new girl with no history, or me? And the ringing went to a single clear high note, like a glass struck with a fork, and I sat there and understood that this was the thing. Not the car, not the shelf, this room. Owen started his presentation, and from the first sentence he had it. Steady voice, steady hands. The drawings on the screen were clean because I had gone through every number twice. The client asked good questions, and he answered everyone without pausing. I let myself look at Hamilton, and he was sitting up straight now, fingers dug into his own sleeves, eyes moving over the slides with the expression of a man looking for a page he knows he wrote and not finding it. Halfway through, Owen clicked past a transition and turned to the room and said that before he moved on, he wanted to walk everyone through the file history and asked Lucinda to bring it up. She clicked twice, and the screen changed. Dates in one column, logins in the next. Every change made to the project files in the last 3 weeks. And in the middle of it, 3 entries sitting there like paint on a white wall. 1103, 1119, 1141, all from Hamilton's account. Each one followed by a specific alteration to a critical measurement in the structural set. The room went quiet in the way a room goes quiet when people stop breathing for a second. The boss put his coffee down without looking at it. Hamilton said those were not his, too fast and slightly too loud, said somebody must have used his login. Owen did not argue. He stood at the front and let the screen do the work. The boss asked him to explain it, and Hamilton started talking quickly about stolen passwords and setups and 6 years of service, looking around the table for one friendly face, and not one person gave him one. That was when I said, out loud, that the recording from Owen's workstation had captured whoever made those changes, and that the laptop camera had been open. Lucinda clicked once more. A still frame, grainy the way laptop cameras always are in low light, and Hamilton in Owen's chair at 11 at night with his face lit blue by the screen and his hands on the keys. He stood up so fast his chair rolled back into the wall. He pointed at me and said I had put the software there, that I had admitted it, that this was entrapment. The boss held up one hand the way you stop traffic and told him to sit down, and there was something final under his voice that the whole room heard. Hamilton did not sit. He turned away from the boss and looked at me instead, and his voice broke, not with anger, with something worse. 6 years, he said. 6 years. And they hand the lead to somebody who has been here too. He said he had built half the templates Owen used. He said he had stayed late every week for 3 years fixing other people's work so the studio could make its dates, and that nobody had ever once said thank you. Nobody in that room moved. And I felt the ringing start to go out, not like a switch this time, but like a tide pulling back. And what came up underneath it surprised me, because it was pity, not for what he did. What he did could have split Owen's head open on the floor under that shelf, but he was not a monster standing there with his hands shaking. He was a man who had spent years being invisible, and had picked the ugliest possible way to be seen. Owen walked toward him and stopped a few feet away and said quietly that he would have helped him, that all he had ever had to do was ask. A tear went down the left side of Hamilton's face, and he did not wipe it. He sat down slowly, put his hands on his knees, looked at the floor, and did not say anything else. The boss stood and asked everyone to step out except Hamilton. People gathered their things and left the way you leave a room where something has happened that you have not finished understanding. Owen caught me in the hallway and asked how I knew, the same 5 words he had used on the sidewalk, and I gave him the same answer. My ears rang. He said he was glad I listened. Then I went out through the front doors into the afternoon and stood on the sidewalk in the sun and listened, and there was nothing in my head at all. Through the window I could still see the conference room. His chair was turned toward the screen. Nobody had pushed it back in.